Good morning, Peacemakers. It's good to be with you on this Thursday and almost into September. We're at August the 22nd, and I wanted to share something with you today that just kind of spoke to me or lifted my heart. I know that among all the prayers that we are praying for people, for the sick, for the lost, that there's also in all of our hearts, we're whispering or saying a prayer for our country, the shape it's in, what it's facing, this next election, and the consequences of whatever the American people decide. And when I got to thinking about that, and at Southeastern, I teach U.S. history course, colonization up to 1877, and I'm teaching that course this semester. And I wanted to share with you something from that course, if you'll let me, about our country, something that I think has its basis in biblical precept or biblical principle. And so if you'll give me a minute, I want to share that with you. I began the first lecture with this statement, this paradoxical statements. And that is that the United States of America is among the youngest leading countries of the world. It is among the youngest of all of them. Maybe it is the youngest of all of them. And there's, we don't even question that. That's easy to prove. When you think about the semi-quincentennial that's coming up, 250 years. That's just still a toddler compared to England, our mother country, or to France, or to all of Europe, or certainly the Eastern countries. It's just excuse me. And I could give you illustration after illustration after illustration about that, but I won't do that. I won't take time to do that. That's not the point of this. But while that is true and that's easy to prove, it's also true that America is one of the oldest, maybe in fact, in some ways, it is the oldest country, the oldest government of any of the leading nations of the world. And so both those statements are true. In what way, though, is the United States the oldest? We understand how it's the youngest, just in time. But how in the world is it the oldest? And one of the ways, there's two primary ways in which it is the oldest nation in the world. And that is this. First of all, reason number one is that it's in our heritage. It's the heritage that we have as Americans. Winston Churchill once made the statement that the Declaration of Independence grew up on the banks of the Thames River. Now, what did he mean by that? I mean, how and in what way is that true? Well, he meant that the principles that Jefferson alliterated in the Declaration of Independence actually were worked out over a long period of time in British history. And it's true if you'll study British history, it's true. The thing is that while that is true, the Great Britain, the British Empire, just drug its feet and did not get around to a full application of those principles. But her colonies, the United States of America now, did long before the British Empire or Great Britain actually applied those principles. And when Churchill talked about that, he said, for example, he said he pointed to the French Revolution, which took place, right about the same time as the American Revolution, and he said if you look at how kings throughout British history, French history, German history, throughout European history, Western history, if you look at the way kings are displaced and a new one put in place, almost always it was at the point of a sword, blood was shed, a war was, or coup was undergone, and it was a violent overthrow of one government to put in place another government or another leadership. In the case of the French Revolution, of course, we know that Louis the 16th, the grandson of Louis the 14th, wound up, he and his wife, Marie Antoinette, lost their heads literally, okay, at the beginning of the French Revolution. But then Churchill also, though often Britain had its own violent overthrows, at the beginning of Churchill talks about what's called the Glorious Revolution of 1688, in which William and Mary willingly gave up some of the power of the monarchy and placed it in the hands of Parliament. In other words, in the hands of the people. And that was a move in the right direction. And thank God they did, because that principle then began to soak into the minds and the hearts, and even the British citizens, if you will, the average Joe in Britain, even they began to believe that in the idea of rulership or leadership by consent, governing by consent. And even though it would be a long time before England would actually fully apply those principles, America, her children, if you will, those 13 colonies would apply them much, much sooner than the British Empire would do so. Now, when England explored, of course, and came to this country, there were many reasons why people came. But once those colonies were established, it's interesting, for 170 years, we didn't know how big this place was. We had no idea how big this place was. An idea, but just it was almost like looking out into a vast, into the stars, as far as they were concerned. Maybe some of the trappers and some of those that had gone west to trap beaver, because beaver pelts became such a commodity, had an idea. But it wasn't until Jefferson sends a couple of fellows by the name of Lewis and Clark, and they, with the help of a Indian maiden, Sacagawea, they find their way across land into the Pacific coast. It wasn't until then that Americans began to get a taste or an idea of just how big and the possibilities of this land. And it began to, you might say, spark a fire in their hearts for what is known as manifest destiny, that all of it from sea to shining sea could be this great country. What we have today is a offspring or the outcome of that spark, if you will. But people came from England and other places as well, other parts of Europe as well, from Great Britain. People came for different reasons. But one of the primary reasons they came, even those that came for religious freedom and others that came for profit, one of the primary reasons that they came was land, because you couldn't own land in England. You couldn't. England's an island. You couldn't own land there, and most of the land was in the hands of the lords and the aristocracy in Europe. And so a peasant, just didn't have a chance. But even though it was very risky, but to get aboard that ship and come over here and know that after just some time of indentured servitude, you could have your own land, you could build your own home, you could farm your own land, or make something out of it yourself, and it could be yours. That drove a lot of people to be willing to take that risk and to come to this country. Something that was impossible for them, it was impossible for them in Europe, seemed all of a sudden now to be a real chance. And of course they came, and many paid the price. At the founding of when the Pilgrims landed, we wind up that half of them die before the first year is out. So it's very difficult time. They're a very difficult price to pay, but in the end, of course, we know hindsight's 2020. It's worth it. But it was kind of a starting all over again for a brand new time, a new home with a lot more room, and new government, new ideas of government that had not really been considered or really looked at before. In America, there would be no aristocracies. There would be no lords. There would be no masters. In fact, we don't use titles of nobility in this country. Thank God. We don't use, it is illegal. It is illegal to call a leader in America, whether it be on a state level or local level or federal level. It is illegal to call them Lord. You can't use that term. Because it was just, the American people were just not going to accept that. In fact, when the Articles of Confederation were written to establish a government during the Revolutionary War, someone had mentioned the possibility that maybe the leader of America under the Articles could be called the king. And of course, it was immediately rejected. There would be no kings in America. There would be no monarchy in America. That at its very foundation was the principle of governing by the people. You can go all the way back to the Massachusetts Bay Colony and find that John Winthrop expressed that so deeply that the power lay with the people. And that concept, though it took a long time for England to accept it, America was founded on it. It was founded on that idea. It would be 90 years later before, after our revolution and the establishment of this new country, it would be 90 more years before England would actually do that. But just a cursory reading of the English Bill of Rights show it looks an awful lot like our first 10 amendments, our Bill of Rights. The only difference was that our Bill of Rights, the American Bill of Rights, provided much more freedom to the average person and much more power in the hands of the people. Our heritage is one of freedom, one of opportunity. And I've shared all this with you because I want you to know that I believe that's a God-given gift. I think it was God's plan that at the very onset of the establishment of those early colonies, those earliest settlements and then colonies, even in the colonial assemblies, little colonial governments, there was no idea, no thought that there should be some lord or master or a king over, but that the people would be represented in each of those assemblies. That was just birthed here. That idea is just birthed here. And even though there are many countries who have followed our lead, who have followed the American model, and have been blessed because of it, we, as young as we are the oldest country, oldest government, representative form of government in the history of the world. Not just still in existence, but period. The oldest in the history of the world that has worked and prospered. And I believe God did that. I personally believe God did that. It is my belief that God did that. As he formed this country as a place from which he would send forth and accomplish the greatest mission work in the history of mankind. More people have been sent off these shores to reach the lost of the world than any country has ever done in the history of the world. And so, in these latter days, I believe that's why America is even established. I pray for her that at least in my lifetime, in my children's lifetime, if the Lord doesn't come back very soon, and I believe he's coming back anytime, I believe and hope and pray for her that she'll retain those principles, not lose them. We've got a lot of people trying to take them away. We've got a lot of people trying to undermine that and thrust upon us systems that just have shown themselves to fail. They failed every time. Socialism, communism, have shown themselves every time to fail. Trying to thrust those things upon us. And we even have leadership that wants to take the powers of the people back into their hands because they think they know better than the rest of us, like a king would. King George, at the time after the Declaration of Independence was signed, King George had made the statement. He said, I am by God, by divine appointment, I am your king, your father. And he said, and you are my children, and you are to do by divine appointment what I say. And Americans just weren't going to stomach that. And so I'm thankful they weren't. I'm thankful and we don't have such a thing. We don't believe in such a thing. And God help us to be able to preserve the idea of governing by the people or governing by consent that our forefathers fought and bled and died for. We, by heritage, are the oldest nation, leading nation in the world. Also, and I won't go into it, but because it's part of but we also by representation. We are by representation the oldest nation among the leading nations of the world. Pray God will help us preserve that till Jesus comes back. I want to ask you to pray for a young lady, a young girl. She's 10 years old. She's the granddaughter of a friend of mine. Actually, friends of mine, Brother Jim and Miss Sandra Smith. He's pastor of ABA Church out in Montana. His 10-year-old granddaughter, Peyton Smith, has a tumor, a large tumor in the center of her brain. They've put a tube in to drain the fluid and the pressure off of her brain. They're doing something, I don't understand it, but it's called mapping, where they're mapping, I guess, the way in which to best treat her with chemo and to try to shrink that tumor. But she's just a 10-year-old baby. I want to ask you to pray for her. Her name is Peyton Smith. Keep her in your prayers. And also, I know you've been praying for her, but I ask you to pray for my sister-in-law, Lisa Hudson. She goes for a biopsy tomorrow. She's scheduled for September the 11th to do the bone marrow. Just pray that it all goes well, that she can get the bone marrow done on the 11th and that it will work and arrest this leukemia that she's fighting. Her immune system's real low right now because of all the treatments that she's had. So just keep Lisa in your prayers, Lisa Hudson in your prayers, if you will. And finally, we're having revival starting Sunday. Brother Bob Birch is going to come and preach, and looking forward to it. We'll have services at 10 o'clock on Sunday, of course, but our other churches and all, and if you can come, we will meet Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night at 6:30 each night. Brother Randy Corley is going to come and be our guest song director. He's going to lead the music, and he'll be singing each night. We have some others coming to sing, and including my son Kerry, and also one of the men in our church, Brother Ricky Moss, his daughter-in-law, Miss Tiffany Moss, will be coming to sing, and we'll have our kids to sing. So there'll be some good music. You'll enjoy it. But I encourage you to come and join us. But if you can't join us, even so, pray for us that we'll have a great revival. God bless you.